African nations should be choosing for themselves which models they want to go after, and whether the debt that they are entering into, whether it's with China or with the World Bank or the IMF or the African Development Bank, is worth it. So that said, one of the negative consequences of many of the negative consequences of colonialism is that African states, African nations no longer trade very much with each other. And that's a problem. And so they redressed this by signing the Continental Free Trade Agreement amongst the African nations. I think this is huge. And I believe that this is the right direction that they want to go in. I think where there is going to be some real competition is as the United States starts trying to sign individual trade agreements with individual countries in Africa. So the Kenyan agreement that is has just recently been signed. I don't know how much the continental free trade nations in Africa will take these individual agreements because some member states are in Africa are saying that it's a breach of their own agreement. So I don't know how that's going to work out, but I believe that African states are standing up and saying, okay, we are the drivers of our own destiny. So there could be some benefits, but if American businesses are destined to play by the rules and know that they have to sort of push aside the much more entrenched Chinese and Russian businesses that can get away with bribes, with payoffs, with handouts, with luxury items that American businesses cannot get away with. We need to also try to enforce the same rules of the game, even if it cannot be the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Then it needs to be things like that. The transparency need to be enforced in the states, in the countries where these actions are taking place. And we are seeing some of that. There are a number of Chinese companies and individuals who have actually faced lawsuits and are being sued because of some of their corrupt practices. So I think as more of that starts to unfold, it's possible that along with the Continental Free Trade Act, that African nations will start getting a much more fair deal. The other aspect I would also argue is when we think about trade and trade imbalances, deficits, I think about the structural adjustment programs of the 90s and how years later the IMF admitted and acknowledged that they were mistaken. These were very, very bad for a number of countries that entered into these structural adjustment programs. But there's never really been any full reimbursement of what they were forced to pay. So there have been some programs, but a large part of that is the interest rates may have been reduced, but not a wholesale forgiving of the debt. So that's an area that I believe should also be looked into.